Hello, and welcome to this Genesis AutoCAD training video. This video will discuss linking AutoCAD diagrams into Revit. This video will cover how AutoCAD and Revit sheets are organized, how to change the space of items in AutoCAD, how to export items from AutoCAD for use in Revit, and how to link AutoCAD files into Revit. Let's begin. AutoCAD and Revit have a similar organizational structure for sheets. In both programs, a sheet is a special area that represents the piece of paper that will be plotted. In both AutoCAD and Revit, you can draw directly on a sheet, and you can insert a view that references other information, such as plans, details, or diagrams. In Revit, you can find sheets in the Sheets area of the project browser. In AutoCAD, you can find sheets in the Sheet List tab of the Sheet Set Manager. While in Revit, sheets are part of a single model, in AutoCAD each sheet is a separate file with work in paper space in a Layout tab. While both programs have sheets, the areas of work are organized differently. In both AutoCAD and Revit, you can create a viewport to see into other areas. A viewport is like a hole cut into a sheet. Each AutoCAD file is split into two spaces, paper space and model space. Paper space represents a sheet of paper. It is where sheet information resides. In an AutoCAD file, you can have many layout tabs, each representing a different sheet of paper. Model space is where drafting is performed. There is only one model space in any AutoCAD file. AutoCAD is structured so that paper space layouts sit above model space. A viewport in a paper space layout cuts a hole into paper space into model space. If we were able to zoom into model space and turn around, we would see the sheet of paper with a hole in it floating high above the drawing area. Revit viewports work similarly, except rather than two spaces, Revit has sheets and views. A Revit sheet represents a sheet of paper to be plotted. A viewport in a sheet is like a window into a Revit view. So paper space in AutoCAD is like a sheet in Revit, and model space in AutoCAD is like a view in Revit. In AutoCAD, one-to-one drawings like details, schedules, or sheets, we often draw in paper space in a sheet. But that's not how Revit works. In Revit, unlike AutoCAD, you don't draw in a sheet. Revit sheets can have notes, title blocks, view titles, and views, but you don't draw any line work there. Revit and AutoCAD understand that the other has the same types of work areas. If you import an AutoCAD file into Revit, Revit expects that line work will be in model space, and that work should link to a view. So if you drew a diagram in AutoCAD in paper space and then try and import it into Revit, you will see an error. This isn't a terminal error. This is just Revit letting you know that it expects actual drawing work from AutoCAD to come from model space. Revit lets you import items from paper space into a view after it shows you the warning. However, Revit will show you the same warning dialog box for every AutoCAD file you link incorrectly. And it will show you all of those dialog boxes every time you open Revit. And it will show those same warning dialogs to everyone who opens a model linked to the models with the incorrectly linked AutoCAD files. That means that everyone who opens the model linked to a model with an error will also see all of those errors for every mislinked CAD file, and they will have to click through them every time they open the model, as will everyone else in the company whose model is linked to it. Every time. Again and again and again. What's more, with cloud models, those same errors appear when someone outside Genesis opens a model linked to one of our error-filled models. As I said, these are not terminal errors, but they are a problem. First of all, it's frustrating to have to click on error after error every time you open a model. Second, if people get used to clicking off relatively harmless errors, they are more likely to ignore serious errors. Lastly, it's terribly embarrassing for an outside company to link to our models and find them full of errors. Thankfully, there's a simple solution. If the AutoCAD file has the work in paper space, there's an easy method to modify the drawing for Revit. Since Revit expects line work to be in model space, we simply have to move our work to model space before we link it into Revit. Here's how to do it. First, we need to create a viewport. Set the viewport layer current. Next, use the command mview. Mview stands for Make Viewport, alias mv. Create a viewport encompassing the entire drawing area of the title block. Next, select the viewport and change its scale to 1:1 using the tool in the status bar. Do not change the scale using the central flyout because that will change the size of the viewport. Next, go to the Common menu and choose Viewport to Model Space. Viewport to model space will create a scaled rectangle in model space that represents the limits of the selected viewport. Note, this tool will only work on rectangular viewports. Then select the 0 option. 0 is a special option for this process. It will place the bottom left corner of the referenced rectangle at 0, 0, AutoCAD's origin point. It will then zoom your viewport to the rectangle's location. Using the 0 option makes things nice and orderly for linking into Revit. Now that we have a viewport and reference rectangle oriented to the origin point, we can simply use the Change Space command to move our paper space items to model space. The command is chspace, also found in the Modify menu, Change Space. Next, select the elements you want to move to model space. Be sure to only select the drawing elements. There's no need to select the view title because Revit will create one when you insert the view on a sheet. When you are finished selecting items, you will see that they look the same, but they are now in model space. Now we can export our work for use in Revit. Next, we're going to export the items we want to link into Revit. For that, we'll need a name. If you're linking an entire sheet or a resource file, you can use the Genesis standard name. But if you are linking a diagram, schedule, or detail, I recommend something descriptive. If there's a view title, copy the value from the view title. Next, switch to model space and use the wblock command, alias WB, to create a new drawing containing just the elements you want to import into Revit. For the name, paste the title you copied from the view title. Save the drawing to your discipline folder in the Revit CAD Links folder. Select the elements you want to link into Revit. There's no need to select the reference rectangle. Now that we've exported drawing elements we want, we need to clean it up. Open the drawing you just made. For an AutoCAD drawing to display properly in Revit, Layer 0 must be on, unlocked, and thawed. Since I'm not doing any more drafting work in this drawing, I like to set Layer 0 to the current layer to ensure that it is set correctly. Also, since 0 can't be purged but other layers can, setting to 0 ensures that all purgeable layers get purged. Before linking an AutoCAD file into Revit, you want to purge. Both Revit and AutoCAD keep a lot of extraneous information in their files. This extraneous information can really bloat a Revit model if not removed. So always remember when importing an AutoCAD file into Revit to use the Super Purge button in the Common ribbon. We've cleaned up the drawing by purging, but there are still a few more things you need to consider before linking your AutoCAD file into Revit. Revit and AutoCAD are made by the same company, so of course they don't talk to each other very well. There are a number of common things we use every day in AutoCAD that Revit doesn't understand. If you're a longtime AutoCAD user, you'll know the shortcut codes for degrees or diameter, %D for degrees, and %C for diameter. But Revit doesn't. So instead of using %D or %C, use Alt 248 and Alt 0216. In AutoCAD, you can change the thickness of a line using polylines, but Revit doesn't have polylines. Instead, in Revit, line thicknesses are controlled by object styles. So if you import a thick polyline into Revit, it won't be any thicker than its object style. This is a particular problem for some leaders and home runs, where the arrow is a tapered polyline. In Revit, instead of an arrow, you will just see a line. The solution is to either replace the text and leader in Revit, or replace the leader arrow with a solid hatch, which Revit does understand. Lastly, you want to think about layers. Each layer in an AutoCAD file you link to will appear as a visibility parameter in imported categories. Earlier, we purged to make sure that only the used layers will be linked to Revit. But there's more to think about. For instance, Revit doesn't understand non-plotting layers. Revit will plot them. So if you have items on a non-plotting layer, you want to manage them in AutoCAD before you link the file into Revit. If you don't want to see any of the information in Revit, then use the laydel command, Laydel, to delete the layer and everything on it. If you still want to be able to see the layer in Revit for reference, but not have it on by default, then I recommend freezing the layer in AutoCAD. If you freeze the layer before linking the file, the items on that layer will be unchecked in imported categories in Revit. But this only works the first time you link to a drawing. If you forget to freeze a layer in AutoCAD before linking, or if you add a layer to the AutoCAD file after linking, the layer will default to checked on in Revit and you will have to turn it off manually in imported categories. Now that the AutoCAD file is cleaned, we can link it into Revit. Open your Revit project. Go to View, Drafting View to create a new view. In the New Drafting View dialog, paste the name you copied from the view title earlier. Set the scale to 12 inches equals 1 foot 0 inches. Click OK. Next, click on the scale in the bottom left corner. In the Custom Scale dialog, click Custom. Check Display Name. Set the display name to No Scale. Set your work set to Link CAD. Now we can link in the AutoCAD file. Go to the Insert tab. Choose Link CAD. Link CAD will create a live link to the AutoCAD file. This maintains fidelity with the CAD file and allows you to easily make changes to it later. Import CAD, unlike Link CAD, will turn all of the AutoCAD elements into Revit elements. It would greatly increase the size of your Revit file and would not allow you to easily make changes to the CAD file in AutoCAD. There are times you want to do that. That's how we created most of our Revit details, for instance. But in this case, I want to continue to be able to make edits in AutoCAD, so I want to use Link CAD. In the Link CAD Formats dialog, browse to the exported AutoCAD file you want. This next part is very important. In the Color section of the Link CAD Formats dialog, be sure to choose black and white. There are times you may want color, but the vast majority of the time you want your diagrams and details to be in black and white. If you forget to set color to black and white, it is troublesome to change it after the fact. For positioning, use Auto, Origin to Internal Origin. Because we used the 0 option when we made our viewport reference rectangle, the file's origin will be in the right place. For layers/levels, we already purged the layers we don't need, so we can leave it set to all. For import units, Auto Detect will work fine. Correct lines that are slightly off axis is also fine to leave checked. Click Open to link the file. There's the file. To check if a CAD file is linked or imported, click on the file in Revit. If Explode is grayed out in the Modified tab, then the file is linked. Now that we have our AutoCAD file linked to a view, we can simply insert it into a sheet. Save the file, and we're done.